A South Bend police officer over the weekend shot and killed a black man and a suspect, and we have found out, based on court documents, that this officer, this sergeant, Ryan O'Neill, was the subject of complaints and accusations of using racist rhetoric in the past, accusations that the police department knew about when they promoted O'Neill in 2015. He was promoted, Sergeant O'Neill, he was promoted to sergeant, despite the fact that Chief Scott Ruskowski, who was appointed by Mayor Pete Buttigieg, knew about at least one of these allegations. And the allegations were made by two police officers, fellow police officers, one of whom was a white officer who said that O'Neill, who was not yet sergeant at the time, that O'Neill made disparaging remarks about interracial couples. I'm paraphrasing, but you can read the exact quotes in our report, and we'll have the link up to that. Talking about interracial couples, said that makes me sick. That made him sick. He also referred to an African-American woman as black meat. Two fellow police officers who complained to a lieutenant who filed a report that went to Internal Affairs. Now, it's important to note that Chief Ruskowski, in a deposition that I've looked at, and it's in court documents, it's out there. It's tough to find for the public if you don't have the paywall, if you don't have the subscription access, but we do, and we've posted screen grabs of some of these things, and the deposition that includes the report making these allegations is also linked in our story, so you can go through and you can check it out and see it for yourself there. The other officer was alleging unspecified remarks about Arabic people, Muslims. And so according to Ruskowski, O'Neill passed a polygraph test on this matter, and it seems that the details are a little unclear. It seems that O'Neill may have been removed from one of his field training officer assignments, but there was no real disciplinary finding or measures taken. And I should add, before I get on to the other officer I'm about to talk about, that we reached out to the Fraternal Order of Police trying to get comment on behalf of both Sergeant O'Neill and the other officer I'm about to mention, and we were not successful in reaching anyone. Their voicemail is not set up to take messages. The president of the chapter, I was told, is in surgery. We did leave a message for the vice president, which was not returned. We also sought comment from Pete Buttigieg, both through his campaign and through the mayor's office, have yet to get comment. I did speak with one source who was a veteran of the South Bend Police, who told me that he witnessed two incidents in which this source claims that O'Neill used what was described as excessive force against black people, two separate incidents, one of which involved a woman. The source says they told the woman, a black woman, to leave the scene of some incident that was occurring at the time. And apparently she did not leave fast enough, and O'Neill allegedly tased her. The source telling me that the taser prongs had to be removed from her spine after the fact. The other incident, a mentally incapacitated black man, it's not clear whether he was on some sort of substance or whether he had emotional or mental health issues, but the man's mother was asking that the man be brought home, be brought back inside. And so the source and O'Neill approached the man, and O'Neill, according to the source, essentially tackled the guy, knocked him to the ground, lay down on top of him, and began punching him, to the point that the source says they intervened. They physically intervened, putting their hands in front of the victim's face to protect him from the punching, from the blows. I asked what precipitated, why this happened, why the physical attack, and the answer was, I don't know, no clue, something along those lines. There just was no explanation for it. The other officer in question is potentially of interest because of a specific angle here that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but in the media, but is starting to get some attention among activists and people who follow the police in South Bend, some of whom I've spoken to. Mr. Logan was not transported to the hospital by an ambulance, which I'm told is standard procedure. The police are typically expected to administer whatever first aid they can, keep the body stable, and await the ambulance. Instead, an officer who was on the scene transported Mr. Logan to the hospital in his vehicle, apparently at O'Neill's direction. And so the use of a police vehicle is raising some flags, raising some questions. And it turns out that the officer whose vehicle it was Officer Aaron Knepper. And Officer Knepper has a much more public history regarding excessive force, sometimes with racial overtones, than Sergeant O'Neill does. There are multiple articles in the local media over the years, 2012, 2014, 2016. Officer Knepper was involved in bursting into a home in pursuit of a suspect, essentially jumping on a sleeping black teenager in the home, attempting to handcuff the teenager, punching him, eventually using a stun gun on him, taking him into custody into the squad car, and then releasing him once they realized wasn't the guy they were looking for. There was another incident in which Knepper and other officers apparently essentially tormented a mentally disabled man who initially had asked them for help to stop a suspected drunk driver from leaving this man's store where he worked as a clerk. It was a 7-Eleven. Knepper and the other officers refused, allegedly saying, "We can't be bothered with the paperwork." The clerk then filed a complaint, ended up getting his tires punctured, getting a tire punctured, and then when he filed a complaint about the tire being punctured, Knepper and the other officers allegedly returned to the store and tricked the man, mentally disabled clerk, tricked the man into eating dangerously unhealthy amounts of cinnamon. Apparently there's some prank out there called the Cinnamon Challenge. It sounds harmless, but reportedly this man was violently sick for hours, vomiting extensively, and eventually won a lawsuit from the city. And that was not the only lawsuit where Knepper's conduct was challenged in court and where the city had to pay out money. There was a white, well-known local golfer who was beaten and sued the city. And I'm possibly even forgetting. Oh yes, there was a black Notre Dame football player. Knepper said that the football player attacked him in an altercation outside a South Bend bar. Witnesses disputed that account to the point where local protesters showed up at the Common Council. That's the city's legislative body. They showed up at the Common Council, and when someone asked, "What can we do to improve the police force?" they began yelling, "Fire Knepper! Fire Knepper!" And again, and at that point, Chief Ruskowski, Buttigieg's appointee, ultimately said that he would remove Knepper from patrol duty. According to the South Bend Tribune and I assume other local media, Knepper was returned to patrol duty as of early 2017, earlier than Ruskowski had said he would be. Ruskowski had originally said, "We're going to wait for certain investigations to play out and see how those go." Knepper was returned to duty prior to those investigations playing out. So there are multiple incidents that have made headlines and have been no secret. So you had Ruskowski and other police officials well aware of allegations in court dealings about O'Neill, and you had Aaron Knepper making headlines and costing the city thousands of dollars for his conduct as a police officer. These are the two people who were the sort of on-scene people responding to reports of car break-ins early Sunday morning in South Bend. O'Neill ended up shooting Mr. Logan, and Knepper ended up transporting Mr. Logan's body to the hospital. So there are still a lot of questions right now about exactly what happened, and there are probably going to be questions about why the force knowingly had these particular officers in the positions they did, doing the work that they did. So now if you guys have questions about our reporting and our work, Ishmael says New York City's in the house. Okay, let me see if I can get to your questions here in the live chat. No, you guys have no questions. That's not helping me, guys. Is it me or is the Midwest having some major issues? Well, that's from the no middle ground. Excuse me, no middle ground. Is the Midwest having some issues? I don't know that this is uniquely situated in the Midwest. Los Angeles has certainly been notorious over the years for having issues with police and racial issues. New York, I was a reporter in New York City when they had any number of horrific incidents involving police and black people. So I don't know that maybe, I don't want to speculate. It doesn't seem to me that it's necessarily limited to one specific area. James says, oh, thank you. James says, I think you do great work. Thank you very much. That's primarily me and Ken Klippenstein, who joins us here on Mondays. With these documents coming to light, is there any rumors within the union of board changes or any kind of power change from within? That's Paul Schulman asking that question. So I'll be candid and say I don't know whether there's a separate union aside from the Fraternal Order of Police, but as I mentioned earlier, the Fraternal Order of Police has not gotten back to me, and it's very important, I think, to note here that it's imminently possible that O'Neill and Knepper did everything by the book, step by step, throughout this entire incident, leading up to it, before and afterwards. It's far too early to jump to the conclusion that they did something wrong. What I think people are grappling with is their conduct becomes especially questionable because of the past that's involved here, as well as the way officials, including Buttigieg's appointees, not just the chief of police, but also the Board of Public Safety, which oversees police discipline and disciplinary measures, they're all appointed by Pete Buttigieg. And he's been mayor since January of 2012. And he said coming in that the police department has issues. And he has certainly instituted a lot of changes, but it's not clear how many of those are systemic and how much impact they've had. There's no indication that racial issues within the department or between the department and the community have dissipated in a meaningful way. Shootings appear to be up in South Bend. So how effective Mayor Buttigieg's measures have been, I think remains an open question, and certainly one that's debated pretty hotly within South Bend. Why aren't we hearing about this on the mainstream news? A Purple Lily One says, why aren't we hearing about this on the mainstream news? So I ask that all the time about our reporting, but in their defense today, I will say we only published this story a few hours ago, so it's only just starting to get out there. And I do suspect that with Mayor Buttigieg, just in case you weren't aware, Mayor Buttigieg on Sunday, to his credit, I think, returned to South Bend from the campaign trail, held a news conference 10 p.m. Sunday evening with the chief of police, Scott Rutkowski, took questions. So it certainly seems at the moment that Buttigieg is engaged with this, and he's being transparent in terms of the police department and the city appear to be releasing relevant records upon request. And the mainstream media are paying attention to this particular shooting. So it's possible that if this shooting and the investigation into it sort of start to surface some of the issues that we've been reporting on for months now regarding the South Bend police broadly, but also in relation to race, it's possible that some of those issues are actually going to start getting some more attention. How can we incentivize the mainstream media press to magnify this story? You know what? That's a great question, and I'm going to save that for Friday, which is when I try to address questions about media and how the media operate and what they respond to. So Kelly If you could post that in the comments, then that'll be saved and I can get to that. Dave C. Asked an article about doing investigating how corrupt grand juries are. I assume that's a reference to the fact that grand juries are essentially vehicles for prosecutors to simply advance their indictments, right? There's no defense involved or anything like that. So it's sort of an open door for prosecutors. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. I'll try to get to any additional ones on how much pushback do you guys get back after breaking stories like these. James Harris says that. So there are different, thank you for asking, thank you for caring. There are different aspects of pushback, right? So the Buttigieg campaign, when I started reporting, was certainly not happy with some of the reporting we were doing, and some of that was actually, to some extent, my fault. There was some miscommunication on one story about when I needed an answer by. Lately, we haven't gotten any pushback in part because we haven't gotten any response whatsoever to our most recent reports from the Buttigieg campaign. What I will confess worries me much more, because campaigns should push back, right? That's the job. It's an adversarial system in a good way. They're supposed to advance their interests. What concerns me a little more is we get a lot of pushback from viewers and readers who dismiss the reporting not on the basis of some empirical reason to question the truth of what we're saying, but because of their beliefs about our motives reporting them. I've been accused of, wanting to knock Pete out because the latest polls show that he's gaining on Sanders. In the meantime, the first time I was told about Sergeant O'Neill was back in early April. A source that I spoke to then identified him to me as having been known as being racist, frankly. And we didn't report it at the time because that wasn't the story I was doing. It was one source, one officer who was not of broader interest at the time. But so I guess what I'm saying is that conversation and that information came to me from a source months before whatever poll it is people think I've been, trying to defeat by spending the last 48 hours talking to a bunch of people on this. And I guess I should point out one thing that really, really disturbs me about this is that some of the people I'm talking to are named in the stories and some of them are not, but they're all real people. And they all have stories to tell. They all have information that's not been out there. They all have opinions about how things are and how things work. And it seems to me that whether you call yourself a Republican or a Democrat, to suggest that giving people a voice, people who've been victimized by police, people who have been police and have witnessed wrongdoing, it strikes me, I don't like to call things un-American, essentially, but it seems to me a founding notion of what we do in this country is permit people to have a voice, and to just reject what they say because you doubt what my motives might be. That pains me a lot, and especially because, to be honest, I've heard from a lot of people in South Bend who have been really movingly grateful for the work we've been doing, not just about telling things that they've told me, but just sharing all of it generally. All right, I've gone on way too long, so thank you guys for tuning in. I hope, as always, that you'll subscribe to our channel here at YouTube and share our content, our videos, our reports if you think they're worthwhile. And also, I hope you'll check us out on Facebook as well. And